Welcome to the Hockey Writers Prospect Corner, a show with our top prospects writing crew, bringing you the latest news, analysis, scouting reports, mocks, rankings, and much more. From the World Juniors to the NHL draft floor, from the farm to the NHL, our team covers everything that happens in the world of prospects. So sit back, grab a notebook, and get ready for Prospect Corner.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Prospect Corner here at the Hockey Writers. I'm your host, Matthew Zator. And as always, joined in by prospect experts Peter Baracchini, Dayton, Reimer. Guys, we've had an eventful last couple days. Not just going to talk about the World Juniors. We're going to talk about the CHL USA Prospects Challenge that wrapped up in the last couple days here. It's the CHL and the NTDP against each other. And lots of 2025 draft eligible that played in this. So saw a glimpse of a lot of the top prospects here playing against each other. I mean, the CHL did dominate the two games, but it was a really good showing for a lot of the guys. So, Peter, how's it going?
Yeah, it's going great. I mean, you mentioned that, we are going to be talking about World Juniors later on, but, a couple of these players, they're basically auditioning to make a name for themselves for the roster. And, we already talked about how the Hlinka Gretzky Cup was the official kickoff to the scouting season. Well, this is just one more tool in the scouting, playbook, notebook, if you want to call it, to get more looks at certain players. And good thing, because there was a lot of excitement in those two games alone. So yeah, really, really good opportunity for these players to showcase their talents again.
For sure, and it's great to always have a new event coming out that you can watch and see these guys. So yeah, it's gonna be fun to have this next year as well. I'm assuming they're gonna do it again. Usually it's not just one-offs; they keep doing it. Dayton, how's it going?
Also pretty good. I wasn't able to watch the show, but I've heard the show, the challenge, but I was able to keep up to date with the scores and all that. It looked like a fantastic turnout, at least for the Canadians. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. I like having a junior challenge like that, so it's not just World Juniors. It takes, more hockey is always better.
Mm-hmm.
So I was happy for that.
Yeah. I said dominated. I mean, they didn't dominate both games. 6-1 in the first one, narrow 3-2, but they still outshot USA quite a bit in the second game. They probably could have won more than 3-2. But it was a couple good games. So we're going to first talk about that before we shift to Team USA, talking about their roster for the World Juniors. So I'll start with you, Peter. Those two games, what did you think about the players? I mean, obviously the CHL, the guys kind of stood out more because they won both games. But who stood out for you? I know you put out an article about this, but highlight some of the players that you were impressed by.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it was heavily tilted towards CHL prospects, mainly because some of the top players for Team USA USA weren't there, because quite a few of them were already at the NCAA level. Because this is more that junior level, the NCAA is one step up from that. So unfortunately, they weren't able to attend the likes of James Hagens, Logan Hensler, Cullen Potter. Although I think there should be an exception that if you're up for the draft, maybe you could participate in the next year. So hopefully that changes, because the USA's roster was lacking in terms of substance, talent, skill compared to that of Team Canada, where you had the top names: Matthew Schaefer, Porter Martin, Michael Misa, Cameron Schmidt, Malcolm Spence. The list goes on and on and on with that roster. And yeah, I mean, from the very beginning, I'm just going to list off my top three that I thought really stood out. Porter Martin, with his energy, power forward late game, ability to find the high danger areas, to sneak in undetected at certain points too, really threw the opposition off, was very timely with his stick checks, leading to dangerous opportunities as well. Smart with his positioning. I really thought that he brought the intensity every single time, and he was mixing it up post whistle, if you want to call it, with the extracurricular activities. And I think, teams are going to love that intensity and ability to get under the opponent's skin. Matthew Schaefer, I mean, hell of a performance in the first game. Nice dish off to Cameron Schmitz early in that second period, but what he did later on with the shot block, with out a glove and a stick, and then he goes end to end moments later for a fantastic goal. I mean, there's a reason why he's a top ranked defenseman right now, but potentially a player that could go first overall as well. We talked about how this could be a four horse or, four headed race with Martone, Misa, Higgins, and now Schaefer. So really loved his game. I think he cemented his spot or brought himself into the conversation for number one overall. And the other one was Lyndon Lakovic. I really thought that he was very productive in the first game. Didn't quite find the score sheet in the second one, but still had those power forward traits that makes him successful. The size, the skill in small spaces. I really thought he really dominated and really continued to improve his stock, so to speak. So now if, scouts probably had him in that 15-10 or not 15 to 25 range, maybe he's going to be up a little bit higher up. Maybe he's going to be in that 10 to 15. And, combined with the league play and this little showcase, I really thought he stood out and he was one of the main performers in game one too. So those are my top three that really stood out for me. There's more that I talked about on my piece as well, but I could only go so long talking about prospects. And, if I had to pick more, I would, but those are my top three.
Sure. I check out Peter's article about the rest of the players that impressed him there. So Matthew Schaefer for sure. I mean, he definitely put himself into that conversation a bit more. I mean, it's only 2 games. It's not really something you could say, well, he really solidified. But he was impressive. So maybe in that conversation a bit more for first overall. We didn't really put him in that when we were talking about who could do it. But I think he definitely kind of made people think a bit more about it after these 2 games. Dayton, what about you for players in this challenge that kind of stood out for you, even though you didn't watch it live there?
Hmm. Um, I really like that the rest of Canada and the world could see Lyndon Lakovic, just how
Yeah.
good he is.
Mhm.
He's really fun to watch live. This year, I mentioned him a little bit before. He's really taken some strides in his offensive game,
Mhm.
and he always had that size and that strength. But seeing him really try to get those shots, and the one game that I did watch live of him, he was really like firing on the net and just looking for those goals. But it wasn't like being a puck hog about it either. He was smart about where he was taking his shots, and yeah, it's just he really wanted to score, and he ended up doing it. I think maybe twice.
Mhm.
Very good game for him. So yeah, I'm glad to share that with
Yeah.
the rest of you. Um, I think one thing that did stand out to me was the lack of shots USA got.
Hmm.
I found that very surprising. The first game, I believe they only had 15 shots. Second game, they had 10 shots. So there's no wonder that the CHL creamed them in the first
Mhm.
one. They were out shooting them. I think. Well, the second game they had 38 shots.
Mhm.
Um, sorry, USA had 12 shots in the second game. Ivan Kovic stopped 10. But like that's that's a significant difference.
Mhm.
And I understand that, the USHL is technically a junior A league, which is where the USNDP they play. So it is a different skill level, but it's always one of the best programs in the United States. So
Mhm.
I didn't anticipate that being as big of a gap as it maybe turned out to be. The second game, of course, was very close, and so things did even out once they had a bit more of a footing. But that first one, I think that's what stood out to me the most was
Mhm.
just how different the shots were
Mhm.
and how much the CHL was ready to prove that they were the top league. And if that's what you want to put on the scale here, like who is the better development program, I think the CHL wins.
It's true. I mean, the thing is it was happening even with Russia when it was that Canada-Russia series, the Super Series they called it, and Canada just destroyed Russia every time, and it's like, yeah, maybe we shouldn't be doing this. But I mean, CHL and the USHL, I mean, USHL has taken a lot of strides in the I'd say last couple or few years where they've been a pretty competitive league. Chicago Steel being the one big one that always is really good. But I think just the amount of players that come out of it in the draft lately, I think is really showing that the USHL is a pretty good league. And maybe these last two games, maybe they'll look, okay, this is the bar we need to get to. And it is kind of when some of your top guys aren't even available, right? You're there in the NCAA. So if they were playing NTDP, then well, they would be in there. And they all have in the past. They just in the NCAA, it just happens to be right now. So yeah, I still think it's not a huge gap, but it is, I think, a little. CHL is definitely a better league at this point still. So, well, we'll see how they go about. Maybe they'll see if this is a bar, maybe to kind of look at in the future here. All right. Well, speaking of Team USA, we'll move to the World Juniors, back to the World Juniors, and talk about their roster or predicted roster. And we, of course, had an article out of the Hockey Writers about a prediction, and that this was written by Anthony Testaguzza. He did put this one together. So I'll start with you, Peter. We'll start with the forwards, as we always do here, and they have a lot of talent that they're going to have available for this tournament. Obviously, they're still one of the top nations in the World Juniors. They've been there, gold medals, getting to the final most of the time. They're going to have guys like Cole Eiserman available. For them, you got Gabe Perreault, you got Quentin Musty, you got James Hagens on this list here. I'm not saying that they will make or Hagens will make this roster, but Peter, what do you think about the forward group that Anthony has kind of put forth as a prediction?
Yeah, I know it's not set in stone, but I really do think James Hagens is going to make the roster. Too talented to not make it. And I mean, yeah, compared to the roster last year, there is a massive overturn where you lost the likes of, Jimmy Snuggerud, Rucker McGroarty, Nazar, Gauthier, Howard. The list goes on and on, even going towards the defense too. You lost a lot of firepower on the back end, but they're still pretty talented up front, as you mentioned. Cole Eiserman, Ryan Leonard's back, Gabe Perreault. I really think that that's going to be their top line or their go-to line, considering the balance that you have with the playmaking ability of Perreault, the power forward like game that Leonard has up the middle, and then the shot that Eiserman has as well. So really impressive there. Hagens on the second line, I think that's pretty much a given right now. I do think that when you look at the depth, that's where I think it's going to be maybe just a tad bit tested on how well they could perform, because I know they got the depth last year. I mean, I'm a big fan of Oliver Moore. I think maybe he's going to provide a very strong impact. Max Plon as well. Kerry Terrance was a big fan of his. Then you look at the other wings where, it's Teddy Stiga and Trevor Connolly. I think he's going to be the X factor, so to speak, because we know how talented he is. It's just that we've seen that his emotions get the best of him at times. Case in point, that USA tournament or that U18 tournament where Canada and USA was going back and forth, and then he takes a really, really bad penalty that ultimately leads to Canada winning a gold medal. So is he able to keep his emotions in check, keep everything kind of steady, focus on what he can do as a skilled player himself? I think that's going to be a big question mark. I mean, big, like a really talented roster forward wise. It's just some question factors when you get towards the bottom six, because I feel like the top six is going to be very offense heavy.
Yeah, there's lots of talent in there. I mean, Oliver Moore's being set on this roster as being a fourth line center, which is pretty crazy with his talent level. And of course, the Blackhawks draft pick. So I mean, lots of talent up front, but maybe some question marks, like you said, in the bottom six there. Dayton, I mean, he mentioned it. Will Smith potentially being that San Jose could. We talked about celebrating last episode. Do you see Will Smith being a guy that they let go? I mean, he hasn't been the best at the NHL level here. It's not like it'd be bad for him to go to the World Juniors again. Do you see that happening? And anyone else that you kind of think could make it onto this roster?
Yeah, I do see Will Smith as somebody who would get a grant of absence, I guess, or leave of absence from their NHL team. I think because he has kind of struggled, he hasn't found his regular spot. And just a reminder, he's played 20 games with the Sharks this season. He only got 3 goals and 8 points.
Mm.
Um, it's it's fine, you know. He's on pace for 31 points. That's okay. It's not what they'd hoped for, but he'll be fine. Like there's no cause for concern. Um, but when you compare that to someone like Macklin Celebrini, who's played only 13 games and already has 7 goals and 11 points, I don't think they're getting rid of Celebrini. They
Mm.
want to keep him because he is driving their offense.
Yeah.
Smith, not so much. He's somebody who could, you know, leave the team and get some more confidence back, have some success at the World Juniors. He was great last year. Yeah, let him do that again. That I could see him going over. Uh, other players who could make it. I'm not 100% sure who might replace this roster. I thought it was a pretty good roster
Mm.
from what Anthony put out there. I'm a big fan of Teddy Stiga. I
Yeah.
watched some of his clips last year. He is a really, really smart player. I'm excited to see if he can make an impact. And then Trevor Connolly. He has the skill. There's no question he has the skill. Will the personal aspects come into play again?
Mm.
Because I think that's probably the reason he wasn't on the team last year, because he was doing a very good job on the ice last
Mm.
year. So whether that comes into play, would they want to try to avoid the potential controversy? Maybe. Um, but I also agree that James Higgins is very likely to make the team. USA usually brings at least one high profile draft eligible player. Last year was Zeev Boyum.
Mm.
This year, almost certain it'll be James Higgins.
Yeah, I think, and him being in the NCAA playing at a higher level already, I think they'd be okay with having a draft eligible underage type guy at the World Juniors. It's usually, like we said before, an older league, older tournament,
Mhm.
usually. So I mean, yeah, I think Higgins is definitely on this team. All right, moving to the defense. I know, Peter, you mentioned that it could there'd be a lot of turnover as well. Of course, they're not going to have Lane Hudson, Ryan Chesley, Seamus Casey, all these guys that were on their team before. I, I mean, they do have some really good guys to replace them, though. Like you mentioned, Dayton Zeev, he's back. EJ Emery, I would assume, would be there too. Cole Hudson, his brother, Lane's brother, potentially could be on this roster. That'd be a draft eligible player as well. Um, Dane, what do you think about this defense that they'd bring? I mean, probably headed up by Zeev on the top pairing. Are they as strong without these other guys being on the team?
I think the forward group is going to be fine. Like that's a really good forward group. They did lose a lot, but they're also going to bring back a lot. I'm a little bit more worried about the defense.
Hmm.
Um, Not to, discount any of the high end ability. Zeev Boyum is incredible. Cole Hudson has some real good potential. We've talked a bit about Logan Hensler as a top pick. Um, but beyond that, is there like another guy like Lane Hudson or some of the other you said his name a second ago and I immediately forgot it. He's with the Devils. What's his name?
Casey.
Casey.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. Yes. Um, Someone like him, right? He's another guy who had that high end skill coming in and could, play in that top four. Is EJ Emery your top right-handed defenseman? Like he's good, but can he command that in a really, really tough tournament? I just wonder if they might be lacking a little bit of that, maybe that puck movement, maybe a bit that high-end offense skill to help out the forwards. Not that they need it, but it's always good to have some blue liners who can do that.
Peter, do you see anyone that could make this roster that maybe replace some of this other guys, or is this the group that you think the US will be taking?
Um, I'm just gonna have to pull up who was at that World Junior Summer Showcase, but I really do think that this is kind of a framework of what this roster could look like. In a sense that I think it does bring good balance. Obviously, we saw how great and tremendous Z William was last year. I know that there's some reservations about EJ Emery possibly not being a top pair defenseman, but about me last season, I was raving about his game overall, especially down the stretch where even the offensive production and the puck movement and transitional play looked to have been a little bit better. He seemed to take some improvements there as a result. Um, I really thought that he really stood out in that sense where he could be relied on, maybe not as an offensive player, but he could be a complementary player to that of William, where you do have that balance. Same with Cole Hudson. You have that two-way play of Logan Hensler as well. I really like that possibility. Um, I think Lucas Fisher is a great depth addition. I love this two-way game and the energy and leadership that he could bring. In terms of other players that could probably push their way onto the lineup. It's possible that you could look at Andrew Strathman, Gavin McCarthy, or even Adam Kleber. I think those are some names as well that could potentially push their way through. Maybe not necessarily have a little bit more offensive upside, but I think with Strahan and McCarthy, that's probably a little bit more likely as well. So those are some names that I would like to see, like in terms of like competition from the blue line for Team USA. I think they can make those names can make them a little bit more deep and a little bit more to go along with that balance as well. Um, Maybe they could knock out somebody like Will Scaham. Maybe they could bump somebody down like Lucas Fisher. Those are some other names that I would keep an eye on as well.
I mean, yeah, they have some other guys they could look at, but I think, of course, the main staples will be who they have at the top there. I think it's going to run through Bouillon and Emery for sure. Cole Hudson, I think, could be a guy that they'll bring on this team because again, he's NCAA playing with Boston University there. So it's something that again at a higher level already they're playing, and usually they're a little more easy to bring these types of guys over to the World Juniors. All right, goaltending, they probably won't have a problem with their starter. That's Trey Augustine. On this, Ross Nicholas Kemp and Hampton Skolinski would be the other guys. But Peter, is Trey Augustine the guy, though? I mean, for sure. I mean, he had a great World Juniors last year. Of course, it was one of the best goaltenders in the tournament. What do you think? Is that are they set with their goalies?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, there's no question that Trey Augustine, I mean, he was the one that backstopped them to a gold medal last year.
Yeah.
Definitely going to do the same again. I mean, you look at his numbers, 8-1, with a 931 save percentage, 189 goals against average in 9 games for Michigan State. He's their number one starter. There's no doubt about that. It's, I think, who's going to be the backup. Is it going to be Nicholas Kemp or is it going to be Hampton Slakinski? Because his numbers look pretty good overall. He's pretty dominant last year, off to another good start this season with Western Michigan as well. 3-1-1, 949 save percentage, 158 goals against average. I mean, less games than what Augustine has right now, but impressive numbers nonetheless. So the fact that he's potentially one that could probably assume the backup role ahead of Nicholas Kempf, I think that's not out of the realm of possibility given what he's able to accomplish so far this season. There's been a lot of talk about him, improving his stock as well. I mean, he was drafted in 2023 and so far he's taking that big step forward. He continues to get better overall. And I think this, if he's able to crack the roster, I think it's a little bit likely that he will, definitely can improve his chances or improve his development as well. And, obviously, backstopping someone like Augustine, if something does happen, you have something that you could probably rely on as well. So I think the goaltending, they're already set. I just think that Slakinski could probably surpass Kempf and become the backup or the second goalie for Team USA.
Unlike Canada, Team USA has no question marks in goal.
Yep.
You know who the starter is. Dayton, do you have any other thoughts about the goaltending beyond Augustine? I mean, it's pretty good, I think.
Yeah, when you have someone that you can bring back like Trey Augustine, you have to. He's going to be one to watch at the tournament. He's going to be a fantastic, kind of anchor. If I was saying that the defense is a little weaker, their goaltending is going to make that fine. Like it's going to be a really solid back end combined with all of that. And I do agree with Peter. Like that's probably the defense they're going to bring. I can't think of anyone who would replace that. Same thing with the goalies. I can't think of really anybody who would sneak in above those guys. Maybe they bring back Sam Hildebrandt as well, who played on the team last year. He didn't play, but he was on the team. He could bring a little bit more experience, a little bit more of that veteran presence, which is really valuable in a quick tournament like this. Even though he didn't play, we've seen guys who were on the team and didn't get any ice time, then come back and have a really big tournament.
Mm.
So I wonder if they maybe consider bringing in Sam Hildebrandt, someone like that, to just give their team a little bit more oomph.
Yeah, I think I just having Augustine, I think they're like, yeah, we're good. And this is his last tournament, so I'm sure he's gonna want to go out in style, right? Of course, he's already got a gold medal, but getting another one would be pretty great. Yeah, I think they're totally good for goaltending. All right, well, that's Team USA. They're probably going to be one of the top teams again. Of course, defending champions. So they're going to look to get another gold medal under their belt. Canada's going to be there too. But we'll talk about predictions on that once all the rosters are finalized, and we'll see what their other competition will be. All right, let's finish the show with our prospects of the week. And I'll go first, and I'm going to be a homer. Usually I am with the prospect of the week. And I'm going to go with Danila Klimovich for Abbotsford Canucks. He's got 5 goals in his last, what is that, 7 games here. And so it's like he's the guy that only had 2 goals last season. Um, and 2 goals and 4 points and only played 24 games. He's already got 8 goals in 17 games to start this season and 12 points. Looks like he's starting to put it together and at the AHL level. He's had kind of an up and down career in the AHL. He came in really early after he was drafted. Had a pretty good season in 2022-23 with 17 goals, but then of course dropped off and he had some injury problems last season, and in fact he wasn't just in the lineup. He was healthy scratched a lot of the time too. But seems to have either fit in with Manuel Holtra as the coach, or his development's just taking a turn for the positive, which is great because the Canucks drafted him in the second round over some other guys, Logan Stankoven. And that's of course been always something that people have been looking back on. So hopefully this can kind of maybe propel him into being a pretty good NHLer because he's got a great shot and he's really dynamic forward. And we all know what he did at that under 18s. That probably was the reason he got drafted in the second round. But I think he's 21 years old now, and I'm glad that he's starting to put it together. Hopefully, he can do it for a full season. But he's off to a great start, on pace for 33 goals to start here. So Danila Klimovich is my prospect of the week. All right, Dayton, what about you? Who's your guy you want to highlight?
Well, I will also stick with a team that I write for. Spoiler alert. Had the jersey up and everything. I think it's really easy to forget about Tomas Hamara, who is with the Brantford Bulldogs. He was a third-round pick of the Senators in 2022, and then didn't have the greatest seasons after that. Kind of slipped down the depth chart, was maybe going to make his AHL debut this year. Ended up getting injured last year, which kind of carried over into this year, and now he's back in the OHL. He has been one of the most consistent defensemen in the league. He's not the biggest scorer by any means, but in his 14 games so far, he's got 13 points, 2 of which are goals, and he is on currently a 4-game point streak, which is the best of his season so far. And that is 4 assists, 1 goal. So 5 points in 4 games. Very good. And that's on a blue line that is not that strong. Brantford isn't one of those, top OHL teams this year. They've been a little bit inconsistent. They've also dealt with some injuries. Adam Juracek was supposed to be one of their top defenders and then got a nasty injury very early on to his OHL career. And, excuse me, Hamara has just been consistent. He's been on the power play. He's been a relatively positive defender. Just a really solid player, showing off in his last season that he can be an NHL player. And this last week, I think, kind of solidified the fact that he is doing very well with the opportunities that he's been given.
And he was your Senators prospect of the week as well. So
Yes, he was.
double, it's getting double mentions there.
You betcha.
All right, Peter, finishing off with you, who's your prospect of the week?
I'm gonna break the trend of being a homer. Sorry, guys. But if you think
Someone has
about
to.
it, he is from, the Scarborough, Toronto area as well. And he was one of those names that I included in my top performers list from the CHL USHL um or Team USA um roster or recap, and that is Kayshawn Aitchison from the Barrie Colts. I really wanted to include him in my top three. Unfortunately, just couldn't quite make the cut, and I didn't have enough time. But I have the time right now, so here we go. Um, Essentially, he was an absolute force physically for Team CHL. I mean, there was no doubt about that. Um, Set the tone early physically. He even had a couple of big time hits. Obviously, one was a penalty. He got called for interference, but big time hit. He's not going to step back, or if he's going to see that opportunity, he's going to lay the boom every single time, whether it's that physicality or even with a shot. He had a really fantastic goal where he just absolutely wired it, went in and out of the net quick. Play continued on, and then 2 or so minutes later, it was counted as a goal because it did hit the back part of the net. So he's got the power, he's got the shot. He's taken a big step overall with his game in terms of like the minutes, usage, taking on more responsibility as a defender. And this is a guy that I absolutely love, where I had him 28th in my preseason rankings. When my midterm slash January rankings start to come out, expect him to move up a couple of spots because he was an absolute dominant force on the back end for Team CHL. He's one of those names to keep an eye on because I absolutely loved his game in actually both games. I thought he was also a very strong defensive presence in the second game as well. 39 points last season, 13 points this season. So kind of on pace to try and beat that as well. We'll see what happens, but I really love the physicality. I love the intensity. And, for him being obviously you need right shot defenseman. He's a left shot, but with all those attributes, he's a guy that could fit in very, very well in a second or third pairing and just be an absolute nightmare to go against. Teams love that. I love that. Kayshawn Aitchison is my prospect of the week.
Yeah, great pick there. He really stood out in that or I guess it's called a tournament prospect challenge, a couple games. He was one of those guys too. Make sure checking out everything from all of our writers here. We got Peter put out his article. You got Jordan Orth, who also has been covering that the two games, and Andrew Forbes too. So lots of coverage for that prospects challenge. So check out all the articles that have been put out about that and that are coming out in the coming days here. So check all that out at thehawkwriters.com. All right. Thanks, Dayton. Thanks, Peter, for coming on, talking prospects. As always, we're going to keep it going next week with our roster predictions and going through his articles. We've had a few more that came out. Team Czechia, Team Sweden, Team Finland. So we'll be running through those. And the rosters will be starting to get preliminary rosters are already starting, actually. I think Slovakia put out their prelims out on Twitter. So those will be coming too, then the final rosters as well. So make sure checking out everything at the site and the Substack and our YouTube channel as well. But until our next episode, we will see you next time.